Welcome to the EQ Fit podcast. Our mission is to equip people to prosper in every aspect of their life. Whether you're at home or in the workplace, we explore practical ways of improving success, satisfaction, finding balance, and building enjoyable and beneficial relationships. Thank you for joining us. You know, sometimes I struggle to come up with a catchy title for these episodes. Today was not that struggle. I immediately came up with the concept of ignorance is not bliss. I think you've heard that phrase in the past, and especially when it comes to what we're going to talk about today, which is a competency of emotional intelligence called recognizing patterns. And I'm going to connect the dots between that, recognizing patterns, and habit formation. I've been doing some work lately, really some deep work on habit formation, habit reinforcement, and then habit transformation, using a brand new assessment that very few people in the world are probably even aware of, much less certified in, to actually give the assessment. And it's called the Habit Story Assessment. But I want to go back to this whole concept of the competencies. Today we're going to talk about the second competency under the category of self-awareness, which is recognizing patterns. And back to my initial thought of the fact that ignorance in this case is not bliss. We may have patterns and habits, and I'll define each of those for you here in a minute, that don't really help us very much. As a matter of fact, they might be holding us back. So as we start to get into this topic of what is recognizing patterns, I'm going to use the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence, which defines recognizing patterns as the ability to identify and understand frequently recurring reactions and behaviors. I'm going to go back through that again. The ability to identify and to understand frequently recurring reactions that we have and behaviors that we express or that manifest in us. This competency / skill, essential in becoming more aware of who we are. And when I talk about self-awareness, it's also how are we showing up for other people. Self-awareness is not just understanding what's inside of us, it's understanding how what's inside of us is getting expressed to the outside world. How are we showing up for other people? This is a really important skill to develop, and it's a part of a course that I'm co-creating with Dr. Chuck Coker in emotional intelligence application. And that's going to be coming soon, and I'll let you know more about that down the road. Let me try to give you a sense when we talk about recognizing patterns. What might that look like? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you realize that you're acting on habit rather than on thought? And it might be having the same conversation with somebody that you've had that conversation with them numerous different times. It's likely about a topic where both of you are operating from more of a pattern response, not really a thoughtful consideration. And that may be due to your beliefs and your values, which is certainly understandable, things that you're not willing to compromise, things that they're not willing to compromise. And because of all of that, you default to this pattern in your interaction with this other person. Another simpler way to say it is if you are married, if you have somebody close to you, you ever find yourself in a conversation where all of a sudden you stop and go, this is the same conversation we always have about this thing. That's a pattern. It could also be you noticing when you're under pressure or you have a lot of stress in your life, you fall into a pattern of some type to find relief. Now, I tend to use a term called escapism, and I don't mean that as judgment or I don't mean that in a negative way. Escaping is not always a bad thing. Sometimes we need to get away. But the real question is that pattern healthy and profitable or not? Because that then becomes more of an indicator of should we allow this to continue or should we try to change into something that is more healthy, more profitable. However, where did it come from? At some time in your past, that pattern was developed because it had a reward to it. And that reward may be avoiding something. Now, most of the time, avoiding something is not really a good thing if it's something that needs to be dealt with. But there are instances where avoiding something is a good thing. So, for instance, avoiding a car crash, that's a really good thing, right? Avoiding some kind of situations that you know will get you in trouble or create significant challenges or problems for you, that's probably a good thing too. So again, there's no judgment in this. This is about considering our patterns and how our patterns form and how they get reinforced or possibly extinguished. How do we get rid of patterns? We're going to look at both patterns and habits to see why they are in place in our lives, but also how they connect to each other. Now, we're going to start, as I said, with patterns and understand what this whole concept, this competency of recognizing patterns is. Recognizing patterns is crucial for developing self-awareness, as we've talked about. It involves understanding your own habitual reactions, but also understanding the triggers behind those reactions, those behaviors. By recognizing emotional and behavioral patterns, we can better regulate our emotions, leading to more effective communication and better decision making. So in the workplace, this might look like helping us understand our own personal strengths and weaknesses, or even those of others. We can improve teamwork. We can enhance leadership. We can be more adaptable and better navigate change. So, developing the ability to recognize patterns earlier enables us to break negative cycles and foster positive changes, or what I like to call transformation, which contributes to our overall personal growth. Now, this skill aids in understanding not only your own behaviors, but also those of other people. We can recognize patterns in ourselves, but we can also recognize those in other people. So, recognizing and adjusting those patterns can lead to improved performance, more productivity, aligning behaviors better with goals and values. In essence, what we're doing with recognizing patterns as a skill or a competency is to enhance our level of emotional intelligence and be able to identify those patterns more quickly so that we create what I call a choice point. A choice point is when you recognize a pattern, as soon as you recognize that pattern, you have a choice to make. Do I stay in the pattern? Do I exit the pattern? That's what I call a choice point. And those are very important because the sooner and the better we can recognize patterns, both in ourselves and others, the more productive and effective we can be. And the more we can be more intentional more often. So, patterns and habits, while often used interchangeably as terms, they actually have nuanced differences, and we're going to talk about those. And understanding the distinctions between them can help us develop more effective strategies for both personal and professional improvement, development, and growth. So now let's connect the dots between patterns and habits. We've already explored that competency called recognized patterns. But going deeper is going to help us gain more clarity on how to change patterns. Patterns are often subconscious, and as are habits for that matter, and can be deeply ingrained in our psyche in the way that we just operate. Think of doing things kind of on autopilot without having to really put a lot of thought into them. Patterns are formed through a very specific sequence, and I'm going to spend just a short amount of time here on this. We could go very deep on this, but I want you to hear the sequence because this is really important if we want to understand how to change things, whether they be patterns and or habits. Something happens and it creates a thought. We have a thought. And the next thing that happens is we attach meaning to that thought. So think of having a thought and then hanging a tag around it where you write on that tag all kinds of things that means to you. What does that thought mean to you about the situation that happened or the conversation, the event, the trigger that created that thought? From those two things, emotions are generated. And emotions are critical here because they are the bridge to the two things that happen next: decisions that get made and actions that get taken. So a thought occurs, we attach meaning to that thought, emotions are generated, decisions are made, and actions are taken. That's how patterns are formed. It's the way our brains work. So what I'm giving you is the way that our brains work around certain things. But embedded in that sequence of how our brain works is the creation of patterns and habits. And we're going to focus specifically on which of those elements are directly related to patterns and which are directly related to habits. A pattern takes into account more than a habit does. Habits are routines of behavior that are repeated regularly and tend to occur subconsciously. Patterns are broader and can encompass thoughts, feelings, emotions, meaning. Habits, though, are more specific, usually pertaining to actions. Both are formed through repetition and can become automatic responses to certain types of stimuli or situations that happen. And that's very natural. We all have that. As a matter of fact, when we focus on patterns and habits, it really helps us to better understand what drives the formation and the reinforcement of both of those. That's a natural part of forming a pattern and or a habit. By the way, here's a fun fact. As much as 43% of our daily actions are enacted through habits, meaning we don't think about them. Up to 43% of our daily actions are done habitually with very little thought to them. That's a little scary, maybe, but it's very true. Habits are initially formed when a specific course of action provides a type of reward. That reward drives the formation and the reinforcement of that habit. Now, that does not take into account the long-term impact our habits have on us. Are they helping us or are they hurting us? And I want to get a little deeper into how habits form, but I want to say before we get there, when people try to change a habit, they're starting in the wrong place. The habit is the action. It is the subconscious action we take based on a specific cue or trigger, which is the first part of 4 parts in the habit formation process. If you really want to change habits, you need to get to a higher level and look at the pattern, because the pattern takes into account what's going on. It takes into account thoughts, emotions, and other things, whereas the habit itself focuses on this happens, this is the action I take. And it's just a cue, a trigger that is then followed by what we call predict. By the way, this is the 2-story TWO story model of the habit story assessment. And I've talked about this in other places, the blog articles we do, even in some of the episodes, I've talked about this. And I'm not going to go deep into that assessment today, except to say there is absolutely nothing else like it on the market. It's a multiple science assessment that provides insight that is just not available anywhere else. And I'm very thankful to have this. This is helping me with many of the people that I work directly with. So think about this process. You think of the number 8 on its side, or the infinity symbol. At the top left, you have the cue or the trigger. Something triggers the habit. Then it goes to the bottom right, which is predict, which is what are the expected outcomes based on that trigger or that cue. Then it goes to the top right, which is act. What is the action taken based on the cue or the trigger? And then it goes down to the bottom left, which is reinforce. What is the reward, consequence that happens? And that reinforcement could also be extinguish. You may decide, nope, this isn't good. I'm not going that way. Let's not do that again. So that's why this 4-part process is so important to understand how habits are formed and how they're reinforced. Now, let's talk for a minute about the impact of patterns and habits. Negative patterns or counterproductive habits can have several detrimental effects. They can lead to stagnation, reduce productivity. They can impact mental and physical health negatively. They can create barriers to personal growth. For instance, counterproductive habits can lead to chronic stress and to underachievement. So, counterproductive habits and negative patterns become roadblocks. They become things that get in the way. They hold us back from many different things. It could be from developing skills that we need. It could be from learning new information. It could be just having energy we need to do what we want to do every day. Now, turn that around. Positive patterns or productive habits can significantly enhance our lives. They can improve efficiency. They can boost our health and our well-being. They can foster personal and professional growth. So a habit of daily exercise, which in the habit story model would be the productive habit of attend, which basically means we pay attention to what's important and we keep up the maintenance on ourselves through physical exercise. That has far-reaching benefits for physical and mental health. I'm going to share a quick story. As a matter of fact, I hadn't planned on doing this, but just this week, I talked to someone, owner of an organization, who is really struggling in a lot of areas, both at home and at work. And of course, as usual, I'm not going to give any specifics about who they are or what the company is they own or anything else. But I am going to share with you, this is a true story. We got to talking about the different things that this person is experiencing in their life on a daily basis. So I am a coach and a counselor, high level coach, and I also kind of have a counseling approach to what I do. And now I don't do anything clinical, but I've been around long enough and done this long enough to see where people may be having some blind spots of things that are creating issues for them, but they're not able to see those things. And in the conversation, this person brought up 2 or 3 different times how tired they were. And now, tiredness or weariness can come from many different places. But one of the things that I know and that we talk about when somebody tells me they're tired, and I hear that several times, is what's the quality of your sleep? Now, that's a very practical kind of thing. And no, I don't give medical or mental health advice in what I do, but I think we're all human beings and have enough common sense to know if you're tired all the time, there's probably something going on there. And we identified some habits that were taking away from this individual's sleep quality. And so we talked about ways to overcome those habits, to transform those habits by understanding the patterns that led them to create the habits. And it really is almost those counterproductive habits that they had created are an outcome of trying to escape the struggles and challenges and the constant stress and pressure from work and from home. And it's a cycle. It is a negative cycle that keeps people stuck. And so what we're looking for is, where are the exit ramps so we can get out of these negative cycles? This is why being able to recognize patterns and understand habits is so critical to everything, to our physical and mental health, to our productivity, to our performance, to our enjoyment and satisfaction in life. So let's talk about that. How do we change these things? So if we want to change patterns and habits, there are very specific things we can do, but it starts with recognizing them and understanding what they are and the impact they have on this. And that starts with increased awareness. Recognize the patterns and habits. It involves being mindful of them, thinking about them, considering those things, and also the behaviors and thoughts that are a part of those. The next thing that we can do to transform patterns and habits is understand the triggers. Identify what triggers the pattern or the habit. It could be an emotional state. It could be a particular time of the day, a specific environment, a specific stimuli or event, something that happens, and that just is the trigger. We have to understand those triggers. Then we can start to set some goals and make them very clear goals. Define what you want to achieve through transforming the pattern or the habit. So start with the end in mind, so to speak. Be specific about what the new pattern or habit should look like. It's funny, a lot of people think, well, I can't change my habit until I change my habit. Well, okay, that's true, but the reality is, have something in mind to work towards versus just trying to push through and figure it out as you go and all of that. No, have a goal in mind, have an objective in mind. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What do you want it to look like? What does good look like when it comes to this? The next thing we can do is create a plan. Develop a step-by-step plan to replace the old pattern or habit with a new, more beneficial one. And it's as simple as that. You know what we're doing? We're really, really working on enhancing our awareness of these patterns and habits so that we can then understand their triggers, so we can have our goals, so we can understand what good looks like and the direction that we want to go. But that means nothing if we don't have a plan to make that happen. What are the steps to take? And it may be as simple as, when I'm going down this road in this pattern where I act habitually in this way, I'm going to put up a stop sign and I'm going to stop immediately. And I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to think about it before I do anything else going down that road. It can be as simple as something like that, putting the pause button in place so that we can pause it, recognize where we are, recognize the triggers, the emotions, the thoughts, all that's involved in that pattern, and then have a plan for how to get where we want to go, being more intentional. Then the last thing, seek support and accountability. Surround yourself with people who will support you and hold you accountable. And that's important. That accountability is important, especially if it's a habit that is difficult to break, or it's got that, what I call that dopamine reward system involved, but it's not a healthy way to go. And you're doing things, and I've got one guy that is a good friend who says, when I tried to explain the dopamine reward system to him, basically, he thought about it, he looked confused and all of that, and he says, wait a minute, I understand what that is. It's when my wife orders something on Amazon and it shows up the next day. I said, that is exactly what the dopamine reward system looks like, at least for your wife, because it's like, I can order it today and it shows up tomorrow, and I am rewarded, and it is awesome. That's a habit I've had to break over the last several months, and have worked hard to do that. So let's kind of pull this together. Recognizing patterns is a critical skill. If we focus on our habits, they're going to provide clues as to which habits are helpful to us and which are holding us back. That insight is going to provide clarity on the habits that we want to change. That provides insight into what the pattern is, where that habit was created from, and what triggers it. So remember that patterns are bigger picture. What are the thoughts? What are the feelings? What are the other things involved? Not just the actions that come habitually. When you put this all together, it allows us to be proactive in transforming our patterns and our habits to enhance our success and our satisfaction, both in life and in work. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any questions about this week's episode, or maybe a suggestion for future episodes you'd like us to explore, please contact us through our website at eqfit.org. For more information and inspiration, connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at EQFit.